and answer session in about 2 minutes. But just before that, very briefly, I want to salute an artist who has taken the words of the great Fintan Lalor and has turned them into another medium, a medium of artistry, which shows the power of the arts, shows, of course, the power of the imagination, and above all, shows a great vision. And I think we're very fortunate to have with us a great living artist, Brendon Deasy, who has a great vision for Ireland himself and has testified that in the magnificent film, which I understood was produced by his son. Is that correct? And I recognise Lalor Fitzpatrick in the audience, or not in the audience, who was the voice background for the declamatory words of James Fintan Lalor. So I want to hand over to Michelle now and to Brendon, and they will conduct the question and answer. And just to say again, very well done, Brendon. Marvellous achievement.
Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michelle deForge. I'm the director of Donamaise Arts Centre, and it's been my absolute privilege over the last year to get to know Brendon and to help in some small way to bring this wonderful exhibition to fruition, as you've seen in our gallery upstairs and also the prints in our cafe downstairs. I just have a couple of questions to chat to Brendon about, and then I'm sure you'd like to ask him some questions yourselves. One of the things I think is always interesting for people coming to our gallery is that they might see the exhibition on the walls, and right at the end there you saw a time-lapse piece where you saw the exhibition being hung in a matter of seconds. And that's maybe the fastest moving phase of an exhibition is hanging it on the walls. But the timeline that goes into the work that you saw very well depicted in the film is quite a long span of time. So maybe, Brendon, you could talk to us a little bit about that timeline from the initial commission. You talked about your research methods in the piece as well, and bringing that all to the point where you're actually picking up the paintbrush.
Yeah, certainly. First thing I'd say, actually, just about the speeded up bit of footage at the end, that's actually real time. I've never seen anybody hang an exhibition as fast as Nick. You know, he's a legend. No, Michelle's quite right. It all started about 18 months ago. Warren Econo, our arts officer, as I said, came to me and suggested I put an exhibition on as part of the Lalor weekend. So I started working on this, and then one of the early meetings I had with Michelle, I was telling her about the idea to go down to Tinnakill House and collect the textures and build them into the paintings, and she said, you know, people would be really interested in finding out about that. You know, is it possible maybe to document it somehow? So that was the inspiration behind the film. So as Michelle said there, and Michael alluded to, Louis, my son, is an emerging filmmaker, really good filmmaker, so I suggested it to him and he was delighted to record it. So over the past 18 months, he's been recording every stage of the production. So there's hours and hours of footage that have been condensed to the 30-minute thing that you just watched there.
And then the time period of the commission through the research phase into the making the work.
Yeah, I was saying to people last night, actually, that the research obviously is paramount. Especially when you're dealing with a historical figure like James Fintan Lalor. Sometimes you're at the audience mercy here, so you don't want to be in a position where somebody points out some little factual error that you've made. Mm-hmm. So it's of paramount importance to get all the facts right. But I say not only the historical facts, it's like the aesthetic facts. I spent a long time in the National Library, and again I was saying to people last night, I was very, very fortunate indeed, because I contacted the National Library. It took about a month, maybe 2 months to get in there, and when I eventually got in to look at the Lalor papers and look at the posters of the time that informed the paintings, they actually told me that I'm going to be one of the very last people who's allowed in. Because of government cutbacks and because of staff shortages, they're not allowing public to go in anymore, which is an absolute travesty. Yeah, it's a real shame. So nevertheless, I was very, very fortunate, so I was very grateful for that access. And I couldn't have done the exhibition without it, So that's the kind of research that I'm interested in. And as Michelle said, it'd be an idea to try and share that with the audience or anybody who's interested in looking at the exhibition.
Mm-hmm. For any of you who are Irish Times readers, you may have noticed over the course of the summer, there was a series of short stories under the theme "This Means War," published by the Irish Times in the context of the centenary of the outbreak of World War II, or World War I, I beg your pardon. And that theme then was open to interpretation by various writers. And Brendon was then invited to create an illustration based on their stories. And those illustrations were published in the Irish Times alongside the text each Saturday over the course of the summer. And I found it interesting that was another example of Brendon taking the written word and again bringing his artistic talents to that and interpreting it as visual art. So is that something you're particularly interested in, taking the written word and that research side of things and creating work based on that? Or is it a coincidence that those projects have happened this year?
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's not just interpreting the written word. What I'm really interested in is storytelling, and I think I can trace that back to my father. My father was always a great storyteller, and growing up, as I said there, he used to tell us, incredible stories about emigration and immigration, indeed, when he got to the north of England. So, and he was just a fantastic storyteller, to the point where he could be telling a story and he'd be crying, and he'd have you crying with laughter, tears coming down your face. And then he'd tell you very kind of moving, emotional things. Now, I might not be as gifted with the words as my father was, but as I mentioned in the film there, my talents, I think, are with drawing and with the materials that I'm using, painting, canvas and so on. So it's the storytelling aspect that I'm very interested in. Lawler's story is fascinating. And over the lunch break, I was telling Michelle that sometimes, when we're conducting historical research, it can be very dense and it can be kind of impenetrable sometimes and a bit off-putting. So I try and break it down and make it entertaining without being pithy, just try and make it attractive. A point, that concerns me a little bit is, like, this morning and last night, the age profile of the audience, it wasn't very young at all, which kind of worries me a little bit. And I think this is one of the challenges that Michelle, myself, and Warren and everybody else involved has got to consider. And actually, we were talking about this, Ian and myself were talking about it at lunchtime as well, that, we need to make history, politics, interesting to young people. It's no secret that, it's about 30% of people aged between 18 and 25 are registered to vote. Now, there's something seriously wrong with society if that is the fact that we're facing with people. There's a real disconnect between what's happening at government level and what's happening with youth. So, as I said, in my own humble way, I'm just trying to make a story like Lawler's interesting to no matter what age people are and no matter what culture they are, because it is a fascinating story. And hopefully, listening to all the debates that people have attended over the weekend, hopefully you will agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. The debates, I think, have sparked a great amount of conversation, a lot of storytelling. In some of the speakers' presentations today, there was a great deal of storytelling about their experience of immigration, or whatever the theme was at the time. So that idea of storytelling and presenting it in an interesting way to bring it forward to another generation, I think, is very important. You might tell us a little bit about the bringing together of this publication, the newspaper which accompanies the exhibition. I can't recommend highly enough that you pick up a copy and read it at your leisure. There's some wonderful contributions by writers, not just who took part in this weekend and last year's conference, but other writers as well. So, and they're kind of turning the tables. They're looking at. They were kind of given one of each of Brendon's paintings to interpret themselves into a piece of writing. So tell us a little bit about inviting them to
you're quite right. It does neatly lead into this because, as I say, storytelling can come in all shapes and forms. From the verbal, to the paintings that I've dealt with. But I did spend a long time working on the paintings, as I've mentioned already. A lot of time researching, and then a lot of time working on the paintings themselves. Each painting took in excess of a month to actually make. So I started to think, I'd hate it if people just kind of glance at these paintings. I go to exhibitions myself, and sometimes I give no more than a cursory glance, and it is sort of disrespectful sometimes to the process and all the work that the artists put into it. So I thought, how can I sort of remedy that? So as Michelle said, I thought it might be an interesting idea to approach people who I find very interesting, who I think have got very interesting things to say. And as Michelle said, basically I give each of them 10 sort of handpicked people who I respect, give them a painting from the exhibition and just ask them to respond to it. Now, some people were saying, like, what do you want me to write? What angle? And I was saying, just interpret it how you want, you know, because I think, as I say, it's the storytelling aspect. Give somebody an image. What you see in the painting, what I see in the painting, what everybody else sees in the painting, hopefully are going to be different things. It's all open to interpretation. So I just said to people, just shoot from the hip. I don't want you to do any research into Lalor. I don't want you to do any extra work. Just write what you feel. And as Michelle said, I was completely and utterly overwhelmed with the response I got. You know, first of all, the excitement that it sort of generated, and then the generosity of spirit. You know, people spent an awful long time, you know, and they would give me a draft, and I'd say, that is brilliant, and they'd come back to me and say, no, that's just the first draft. I want to work a bit more on it, you know. And I was genuinely really overwhelmed. So, you know, as a tribute to all the contributors, you know, I spent a long time designing it, and going back to the research that I'd done in the National Library, where I really studied the nation and the Irish felon, and wanted to do justice to those newspapers, but it was like a bit of a balancing act, because I wanted the newspaper to look like it was done in the style of those papers. But the problem was, if you look at those papers, they're very, very dense indeed, very narrow columns. Obviously, there's no images. You know, printing hadn't developed that far. They're all in black and white. So it was, you know, kind of doing that balancing act to make it look like it was printed in the 1840s, but at the same time, I want people to read it, you know, so I had to kind of make the letter spacing, the leading a little bit more generous, give a bit more white space around, obviously use colour images. But again, you know, as Michelle said there, you know, the feedback we've got from this has just been absolutely tremendous, and I've got to thank Ian and the rest of the committee for having the faith in me to produce something like this.
Certainly, yeah. Can I invite anyone in the audience now to ask Brendon some questions, whether about the film or indeed anything that was provoked over the weekend's debates? To see.
Yeah. County Council to initiate a programme to the schools, saying that we could have actually filled all the empty seats with maybe transition year students. Because history, when it goes from the third year level, where it is very hard to ignite interest in some people at a very young age, but once they decide after junior cert level to take on history, that I did hope that after last year's, that the schools would have been maybe approached, and maybe with cutbacks it wasn't possible, but maybe even approaching some of the transition year coordinators to try and push for the students to come in and maybe even participate in something like we had with Sean Ryan last night.
Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. Were you the lady who spoke, who mentioned last night about you find it difficult to teach history?
Well, yeah, I just stood in for a teacher, and I just found out of 29 students, when you're really trying to get them just interested, 9 people, or 7 out of the 29 put up their hands and actually said they were interested, and the others were just not interested at all.
Yeah.
But
certainly, we've already had one school group visit the exhibition with their teachers, so you know, we hope to have more of those. The exhibition goes on till the 8th of November, so you know, we're very keen that as many school groups as possible would visit that. But certainly for next year, it'd be wonderful to have more participate in the weekend debates.
Yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more.
That's it, gentlemen over that side. Sorry, the lights are a little high. I'm trying to see.
Hello. Just congratulations to Brendon on the interpretation of the words of Fintan Lalor. But he was talking about the time frame. I mean, he's gone back 18 months, 2 years. Yeah. Now, it was probably the worst 2 years in you know, economic wise of this state, like. But okay, what I'm saying is, if we're led to believe now by the government that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, we'll turn the corner. Do you think, Brendon, if you were commissioned to do this piece today, would it be any different? I mean, would you have included what you have now, or would it be a different interpretation?
It's a very good question, Ray, and I don't think I could just answer it off the cuff. If you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say no. I can't see many changes.
Or are we just led to believe there's a change?
Unfortunately, I think, you know, this morning I heard the phrase a couple of times, smoke and mirrors. I think there's an awful lot of smoke and mirrors going on to try and let us believe things are changing. I can't say, you know, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I can't see an awful lot of change. So, my immediate reaction to you is, unfortunately, no, I don't think things are changing. Not for the better, anyway.
Sorry again, I'm trying to see. There's a lady on the aisle there. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart and congratulations. You've put into images and in that documentary something that I think will inspire us in time to come. Even if times get better in 10 years' time, I think it's a piece of history in itself.
Certainly.
That documentary is worth having. And the second point is, I hope Louis Deasy is planning to make it commercially available on DVD, because I'd certainly buy a few copies.
Well, thank you very much for both of those points. The first one, I'm very flattered when you say that, and hopefully, what I wanted to do is kind of promote discussion, if nothing else. But as you say, I think it's important, and as I say, it was Michelle's suggestion to document this. I've given 18 months of my life to this, so it's a valuable document. And like you say, maybe in 10 years, maybe 20 years, 30 years, there is a document there, a safe document about like what the times we're kind of living in. The second point, I don't know, I suppose this is the time to mention it. Louis is my son, and this is almost his kind of farewell gift. He's emigrating to New Zealand on Monday.
There you go. To have many adventures and come home and tell us all about them and create wonderful new art when he returns, I hope. Yeah. So, do we have more questions?
Sorry?
Yes.
The artists tell us how much paintings and prints cost. Sorry, that's a very...
No, certainly. The price, there's a price range of from €225 for the prints up to... Do you want to talk about that?
Yes.
The range, but it's something I always say at an exhibition, that the only way you can enhance this wonderful artwork is by adding a red dot. And if you've been truly inspired this weekend, take home a piece of this wonderful history and this wonderful tribute.
Well, thanks both Mike for prompting that, and thanks Michelle. Basically, the paintings upstairs are kind of one-offs, and as I say, they all, well, they took a long time to produce if you add into the research as well as the production. So we were talking about this, and we said what we'd do is release a limited edition of Giclées, which are the best sort of archival prints you can get. And believe it or not, the guarantee is that the prints last longer than the paintings. That's the way technology is kind of overtaken different media now. So the Giclées are for sale downstairs in the gallery, and each one has got a little price underneath of it. Speak to Michelle and her staff about that if anybody wants to make any.
On the aisle just back up there.
Yes, it's very interesting, and I'm just wondering, do you see any conflict between because obviously you're dealing with a very political construct of one man's ideology, really, one man's version of the truth, and we'd say there is no truth. Do you see any conflict between that and the art you produce, between politics and art? Do you understand what I'm saying?
So conflict, did you say?
Yes.
Not really. All I might say is that, probably just to repeat what I said in the film there, that, basically, you probably know about Lalor now if you've attended all the talks. He was dropped at birth, he had severe curvature of the spine, he always suffered from ill health. But what we've been left with is very, very powerful words. So the tools that Lalor had to express his revulsion at what was happening at the island at the time was his words, that he put into print and they were published and so on. What I'm trying to do is take his words and relate them in the way that I know, and the way I know is basically through paint. So I don't personally see a conflict, but it's interesting if you can see a conflict, and if you want to expand on it, I'm more than happy to.
I was just thinking of Yeats when he says, when I quarrel with myself, I make art.
When I what, sorry?
When I
quarrel with myself, I make art. Yeah.
I'm not quarrelling with you, by the way. I'm trying to get to the point.
Yeah.
Do you see? Are you too much of a believer in Lalor to quarrel with him?
I have to confess at the beginning, I knew very little about Lalor. As I mentioned in the film, my particular hero from Irish history is Michael Davitt, and that sort of comes through my father, who was born in the neighbouring parish to him, and then I grew up about 6 miles away from where Davitt had emigrated to. So I've always been fascinated ever since I was small in Davitt. So the little I knew about Lalor was that Davitt cited him as a key influence. So it was when, as I say, Warren came to me initially and said, would you put on an exhibition, maybe something like you did for the Davitt project? So I said, listen, all I know about him is that he was a hunchback, basically, so there was some kind of commonalities between himself and Davitt that, just incidentally, I do believe, it's interesting that Lalor's father was a serious landowner, and yet, Lalor got so involved in the land question, and you might start to wonder why. And I wonder whether it's because he was a hunchback. He didn't have the normal kind of upbringing of other kids his age. He was kind of schooled at home, and I felt he maybe was like ostracized. And I think that probably informed his own sort of political ideology, that he had real empathy with the downtrodden and the people who couldn't speak up for themselves. So, I wasn't a big believer in him because I didn't know much about him, but the more I read about him, the more fascinating I found him. But particularly the point that I'd have to keep enforcing is, when I was reading his words, they were just written for today, and you can see there in the paintings, trust me, I haven't changed a bit of punctuation, let alone a letter or else a word. They were written for today. And as I said, like Michelle said, please take away one of the newspapers and read all the other articles are brilliant. But what I mentioned in my own article was that the subject matter was also all too easy to find. I just looked around, and it was there. In fact, I was spoiled for choice the way I could interpret his words and make them relevant to today. So no, hand on heart, I've never felt any conflict throughout the 18 months working on it.
That's fine. Thanks very much.
Thanks for the question.
And thanks for the exhibition.
Pleasure.
Any other hands up there? See anyone? If there's, yeah, Michael. Sorry, just to the rear there.
Just, again, I'd say James Fintan anyway would be highly thrilled with your whole performance, because he really captured the words he was using anyway. You have courted controversy, there's no doubt, with your paintings, but I think that's what artists should be doing. We need to get imagination going in everyone's head, and it does really come through art. It was Einstein said, artists are the true genius, and what you done is genius, there's no doubt, because it does pay. I wouldn't know a huge amount of Jane Fintan, I would have known a bit, the way you encrypted it and framed it, definitely top class. Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for that comment, and I do sincerely appreciate it. It was actually George Braque who said art's job is to upset people. And if you notice, Bono was using the very same quote last week, but he wasn't attributing it to George Braque. It was as if he'd made it. I do believe, trust me, I've tried just doing the landscapes, but I don't feel comfortable doing it. I think, I read another quote somewhere, and it said, by being alive, you've got to be partisan. If you're alive, you should have an opinion. And as I say, because it was a commission initially, I felt I had to respond to it somehow. And this is the way I've responded to those words. And you are quite right. Hopefully the idea is, and going back to what the history teacher was saying there is this disconnect at the minute. And, if I can try and I don't mean this in a patronising way, but if I can try and educate people who might not have known about Lalor, or else who might not be aware of what's going on in the world. And going back to what Jim was saying this morning, Jim O'Brien, I thought he made some really, really fascinating points. This attitude that we can't be arsed, somebody else will deal with it, sweep it under the carpet, don't face up to the scars that the famine left, don't face up to the scars that emigration. I think we're doing ourselves an injustice. I think we've got to be very mature about it and look at the subjects head on. And if at least we can, the Minister for Foreign Affairs was here last night, and he was saying that he agreed with some of the stuff I was saying. He doesn't agree with a lot of the things I was saying. But at least it's the start of a bit of a dialogue. It's a shame he's not here to witness the film and continue the debate, but there we go, at least you're here.
Okay. I don't think we have any other questions from the floor. I'd just like to conclude by thanking Brendon very sincerely for the wonderful exhibition, where I think he's just so wonderfully coloured history in for us. And I think it was just a wonderful addition to the weekend's conference. The comments on the visitors book over the last month have just been so positive. The reaction from everyone who attended this weekend, just so many compliments on the thought-provoking and debate-inspiring exhibition. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to Louis for the wonderful documentary film we just watched. And I'm sure we all wish him the very best of luck in his year ahead. The exhibition continues until Saturday the 8th of November, so please do encourage people to come back and enjoy it. And like I said, there is no better compliment than a red dot on one of the paintings or a print, so I can't encourage you enough to do that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.